This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to the Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. We're back with Emma Hinchliffe. Emma, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So Emma is the editor of Fortune's Most Powerful Women, and then every year you have a summit with these most powerful women CEOs from around the globe. You are been involved in business and business writing and journalism for quite a few years now, and your access to information is probably unparalleled based on your day-to-day work and what you do. And I am absolutely honored to have you as a part of the Business Decoded podcast. Just your knowledge and your information is just amazing. So welcome back.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, so I know that when we spoke last, we had a brief conversation about Gen Z and about the summit and what you're doing to inspire more women to take leadership roles within these organizations. Tell us again about your summit and what you do every year as a part of your work.
The Most Powerful Women Summit is an event that's been happening in some form for almost 30 years, not quite. And it's just a gathering of the women who we are covering through the Most Powerful Women franchise at Fortune every day. So these are women who are CEOs of the most influential companies in the US and in the world, women who are rising executives leading, business units over at least $500 million a year within those companies, as well as, more recently, some of the most influential founders in fields like AI, where they might be pre-revenue, but every corporate executive definitely wants to hear from them and learn about the technology that they're building, as well as women across other fields like sports, entertainment, politics, etc.
And what do you think would be an interesting story from your summit that would shed light on some interesting concepts? What's something that you've learned maybe behind the scenes that you can share with our listener about some of the CEOs that you've worked with as a part of the program?
I would say that one of the most illustrative conversations for me recently was at our summit in October 2025, where we had an amazing conversation that was off the record, so I can't go into too much detail.
Yeah.
But it was, and usually it's on the records, that's unusual. But when I get to the theme, you'll see why. This was between 3 former CEOs, and it was called Life After the Big Job.
Yes.
And so it was a conversation about what happens when you're not a CEO anymore, both the kind of business side of that,
Right.
What actually happens, what was going on, et cetera, as well as the personal side of that, kind of those questions of identity and ego. Who am I now? Who am I without this title? What do I do next? And I think we found that was something really special that the Most Powerful Women Summit could bring, because it is this community feeling of women who all kind of understand to a degree the experiences of others in the room, where it feels like an environment in which you'd want to have that conversation and you'd want to really go deep in that way. And that was a conversation with 2 former Fortune 500 CEOs, Karen Lynch, who led CVS Health, which was number 4 on the Fortune 500. And her leadership of that business made it the largest Fortune 500 company ever led by a female CEO.
Amazing.
As well as Roz Brewer, who led Walgreens, coincidentally a CVS competitor, and Seema Sistani, who led Weight Watchers.
That's amazing. So you speak about life after being a CEO, looking back at former female CEOs. Who stands out to you?
In history?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I know that
Pepsi had a great CEO just some years ago that led them for many years.
Yes, I think, there's this era of women who were among the first when women were really starting to hold these jobs in a more significant way. Someone like Indra Nooyi, who was the CEO of PepsiCo, or Ursula Burns, who was the CEO of Xerox. Like, these are women who really, you have to be really, really exceptional to become the CEO of a gigantic company like that, when women have not really done that in a real way before you.
Right.
And then there are, of course, other historical examples. I believe you might be familiar with the first ever female CEO of a Fortune 500 company, who was Katharine Graham, who led the Washington Post Company, which was a much larger company back in the day when they held many cable, TV stations, et cetera, et cetera. And I think for me as a journalist, I think obviously she's had impact for women in business, but also for journalism. And so that's a really special one.
Now, I don't think this person appeared on the Fortune 500 list, but I've looked at her work, and Martha Stewart had a really fascinating journey. If I remember correctly, I think she was the first female self-made billionaire in the U.S., which is just an incredible feat to achieve for someone. And so I often think about her again. I know she probably wasn't on the Fortune 500 list, but an amazing person and her contribution to business.
Yeah, she really, really did a lot. That business she was running was huge. And, that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
What led to that all kind of coming crashing down in a way. But she's been an amazing example of figuring out what to do next and kind of rising from that experience and creating an entirely new chapter for herself.
Right. I think it's the most interesting thing, her relationship with Snoop Dogg. It seems like a really interesting partnership. You mentioned this in the last program, that there's so many more women leaders that do not make the list, the Fortune list. And that's refreshing to see that there are just this pipeline of additional people that are growing up in the business system to lead wonderful companies, even if they're not on the list, right?
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the different ways you can have or define power today. Being a Fortune 500 CEO is only one measure of power. Like we talked about, women leading in AI and building these new companies that are going to influence the next several decades. Women who are on the path who are wielding influence at some of the world's biggest companies like Apple and Walmart, even if they're not in that CEO job exactly, there are other ways to have influence.
So I just had a thought. Some years ago, I ended up serving in jury duty. And I ended up being on this trial that was really long in jury duty. But I remember you have to give an introduction of yourself. And I mentioned that I was trying not to give a lot of specific details, but I mentioned to the judge as they were asking me questions that I was working for a Fortune 500 company. And they didn't know what that represented, right? Which was surprising to me. What for the small business owners and for other people listening in, or maybe for the Gen Z that's looking to build their career, tell them what a Fortune 500 designation means. What is a Fortune 500 company?
The Fortune 500 is based in data. So it is a list of the 500 largest US-based businesses by annual revenue.
Right.
And so it is very clear whether you make that list or not. So typically, the smallest company on that list is somewhere around $5 to $7 billion, depending on the year. I think every year that standard goes up.
Right.
And so these are the companies that are overseeing altogether millions of employees, billions and billions, trillions in revenue, and that are influencing the way that we all operate in the world today, the products we buy, the jobs we can have, the state of the economy.
Right.
And so they don't represent the entire ecosystem of American business or global business. As you mentioned, small business owners are a huge force in the economy. But looking at the Fortune 500 can really give you a kind of snapshot into what is happening in the rest of business today. And for a company itself, it can be a designator of really having reached that elite status in business.
Right. I know even in college, I've been tracking these larger companies forever because I think it's so important to know the business framework, the business community, especially if you're looking to build a career in business. I think you just need to know who some of these people are, who the players are, who some of the influencers are. But looking at the list of Fortune 500 women CEOs, amazing companies. You think about Mary Barr at General Motors, huge organization, ranked number 19th, I think, on your list, or Jane Fraser at Citigroup, another massive organization that provides banking, or UPS, United Parcel Service, and Carol Tomé. Absolutely incredible. Even at Best Buy, people might not recognize that's run by Corey Barry. Amazing. Some of the people that are leading wonderful, large companies, even Dick's Sporting Good, for those that are in the sporting industry, Lauren Hobart. Absolutely amazing work by these leaders. So you spend a lot of time with them. If you were speaking to a small company leader that's looking to grow into that direction of being a Fortune 500 company, assuming that they've got a pipeline like Amazon. At Amazon in the early days, my understanding is that people were building their own wooden desks from lumber purchased from Home Depot. And now they're the second largest company in the world, over $600 billion in revenue. Absolutely amazing. But if you had to give either the younger generation or a business leader that's looking to grow into Fortune 500 status, what would you tell them? Like what would you give them to help inspire them towards reaching that goal? And two, from a leadership perspective, what kind of additional nuggets would you pick up, Business Decoded tips on how to build and grow a business?
Podcasts are so popular, even monkeys are doing it.
75% of Americans listen to podcasts monthly. That's 210 million people in the United States alone. And yes, podcasts are profitable. Joe Rogan is making $30 million per year. Your content, your knowledge is worth sharing. Don't just dream it, do it. Visit andycostafilms.com/podcast and turn your content into leaks.
I would say something that I hear a lot from leaders is that, the people, and this, sometimes can include the founder themselves, but not always, but the people and the strategies that get you from, 0 to 100 million are not the same ones that get you from 100 million to 500 million or to 5 billion. And so really kind of understanding that and taking stock at every step of, do I have the right strategies and team in place to enter this next chapter and achieve this next phase of growth, is something that is super important and that I hear from business leaders a lot and founders in the startup space as well, who I also spend a lot of time with. But I think we're also in this era where, obviously, if your goal is to build one of the world's largest businesses, that's incredible. There are also lots of other ways to have success and to influence society and build sustainable businesses and careers. And so thinking about other ways to achieve that goal can be really useful as well.
Right. Now, you work beyond working with Fortune 500 CEOs. You worked across other spectrums, right? From politicians to Hollywood stars, athletes. What do you see are some of the differences between those categories of leaders, and who would be an interesting connection that you've had in those industries? Is there anyone that stands out as like, wow, I really wanted to meet this person and I had a chance to meet them and they were astounding? But tell us about some of those other segments and your engagement with them.
Outside of business, I think I've had the opportunity to meet some really incredible people across society, whether you're talking about more in entertainment or also business, where I wrote a profile for Fortune in 2023 of Kim Kardashian.
Oh, wow.
I have interviewed at our conferences. Did
you meet Kim Kardashian by any chance?
I did spend some time with Kim, who a lot of business lessons that you can learn from her. I think in sports, I've gotten to spend some time with Sue Bird, who's an amazing WNBA legend. In politics, I had the honor of interviewing at our conference just like a week and a half after she was appointed to a California Senate seat, Senator LaFonza Butler, who had been appointed to the open seat in California after the passing of Dianne Feinstein. And so really just, there's so much you can take away from, women who have really risen to the top across fields, not just in business. And I think in startups and as well technology, if we're thinking about that as slightly distinct from the Fortune 500, corporate. I've also gotten to spend some time and write a long profile of Melanie Perkins, who founded Canva in Australia, which is just an amazing story.
Wow. Can you tell us about that story? A lot of people are using Canva these days. In fact, I received a document the other day developed through Canva, but tell us about that story, anything that you picked up. It's an amazing story.
Yeah. Melanie's story is really incredible. She founded Canva in Australia, which at the time had zero startup ecosystem.
Wow.
She flew to California and I think slept on her brother's couch for like the length of a tourist visa and heard, more than 100 no's from venture capitalists.
Right.
Was able to get enough funding to get it off the ground. And I think one of the biggest effects of Canva today is that, Australia today has a thriving startup venture capital ecosystem, which fully did not exist before Canva kind of kicked it off and helped create it. And in terms of Canva, the business, Melanie is a founder who really has kind of a vision, kind of a quiet world domination. She's like operating 5 steps ahead of what's coming next, always thinking about the long-term impact, the societal impact of what she's building. They have what they call a 2-step plan where their goal is, as we discussed, to build one of the world's most valuable companies. They're tackling enterprise, competing with not just Adobe and Photoshop, but with Microsoft and Google. And then their goal is to then use the wealth from that value creation to improve the planet and society. And so that's really a lofty vision that it takes someone with a really distinct point of view to set.
Now, Emma, tell me this, and we'll, I guess, end in this discussion, but the idea of her sleeping on the couch to start the company, coming to a completely different country, maybe not understanding the culture and the nuances of trying to build a business, it takes a lot of personal fortitude to make that level of a sacrifice. What would you tell someone looking at the concept of starting a business? Because it's kind of like what you mentioned earlier, staying up to 4 a.m. just to get your product out. It's a lot of hard work, and it takes a level of dedication that a lot of people might not have the strength to give. What would you say about that process and that evolution of starting a business from zero?
I would say it comes back to passion, and you have to really believe in what you're doing. I think if you're only building something because you want to become wealthy, you want to sell it, you want to exit, I don't know if that, maybe for some people, but for everyone, it might not be enough to power you through those really tough moments. But if you're building something because you truly believe in it, because you think the world needs it, because you think that, this is something that you just have to create, then that often really can get you through those challenges.
Right. Now, are you spending any time in cryptocurrency and other forms of AI? I know there's so much of a ecosystem evolving around AI and data centers and the need for data centers, and almost kind of related is the cryptocurrency. There's a lot of data required for that. But what are you seeing as an evolution of those two segments?
Yeah, in AI, there are, so many women who are really influencing this future. If you look at someone like Mira Murati, who had been the chief technology officer of OpenAI and now is building her own company, competitor called Thinking Machines Lab. She's an incredible example. Someone like Fei Li, who has been called the godmother of AI, who really was at the forefront of this research and technology before it became a commercial juggernaut. Right. And then if you look at OpenAI today, they've hired people like Fiji Simo, who came from Meta, who's really driving the commercialization, the advertising business, and turning AI chatbots into not just a new product that's fun to use, but kind of a true business juggernaut.
Absolutely amazing. Now, to close, Emma, what final tips would you give anyone in business now? Emma's lessons learned. I don't know if you have like your top 3 points that would be intriguing for people to hear about and learn from and explore as they map out their career or their business growth. But what, Emma, Business Decoded tips would you leave with our listener?
I'll give some perspective from where I sit as a journalist. Yeah. So, I would say really think about your story, owning your story. If you don't define it for yourself, someone else will define it for you.
Right.
So really thinking about that as part of the journey from the beginning, not just something that comes later. I think, what people respond to is in storytelling, whether it's in the shows they choose to watch on TV or the products they buy, is that emotion, character, story. And so really be thinking about that from the beginning of your journey. And that can include interacting with the traditional media, with the press, developing relationships with journalists, really creating those relationships that they are true relationships and not just kind of transactional, right. Kind of cover my news right now. I think that is not necessary, especially when you're a small company and not necessarily at the point where your news is driving the news cycle. Right. You really need to put that effort into finding the right people who really resonate with your story, and who telling some aspect of your story resonates with their audience. And so I would say those are my 2: define your story and really work on building those relationships in the media.
And how would a company go about building those relationships in the media, especially for small companies that might be new to understanding how media operates. I had one person in media indicate to me, which was fantastic, that these companies shouldn't necessarily wait to be found. Now, they should be proactive in building these relationships and finding people in the media and writing press releases. But a lot of them really don't understand it and how to make that connection. I think they just think that the media will show up if they do something great within their business. And it doesn't quite work that way, but the media plays an incredible role. But that partnership is a partnership that can be created that a lot of people don't realize is available for them to create.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to understanding the media is engaging with it yourself as a reader, a viewer, a consumer. And so before you send out a million emails to journalists, hoping that they'll cover something you're doing, really spend some time reading their work, subscribe to newsletters, watch their videos, and understand who they are and what interests them. And when you find those people who, you enjoy what they're producing, and you can truly say, not just, it would be good for my business if they'd cover me, but like, I genuinely believe that what I'm doing aligns with the stories they're telling, then you can have, a much more impactful result.
Fantastic. 2026, what's on the horizon for Emma? Is there anything exciting for you?
Yeah, I think, it's been a time of transition in media, as you mentioned, AI, like there's so much going on in 2026. I think we're going to see just the importance of original storytelling and news and information and, value and community that, you can't get anywhere else, that cannot be replicated by AI. So that's what I'm focused on doing this year.
Fantastic. Emma, thank you once again for joining us on the Business Decoded podcast. I admire your work. I've enjoyed reading your work and seeing what you're doing within the business community from a media perspective. So I appreciate everything that you're doing as a journalist.
Thank you so much. Same to you.
Okay. Thank you for joining us on Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share, and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.